Welcome back to the Roll-Up High Roller community. As always, nothing on the roll-up is to be construed as financial advice. We are just some educators in the DeFi space. Toss us a quick like, give us a share, a repost, send it to a friend who may want to watch this, and finally, give us a sub or a follow. It means the world to help support credibly neutral educational content in DeFi. We're here to educate, empower, and enrich you, and let's jump in.
Welcome to DeFi by Design, where we talk all things blockchain and cryptocurrency while striving to educate, empower, and enrich.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to episode 116 of the DeFi by Design podcast. We just got Hyperlane pilled about an hour ago. We are building the modular future. We are just adding stacks to the modular stack at this point. We got our boy Sunny in here. Osmosis is going to be, should I say, the DeFi hub of Cosmos Hub. Sunny, GM, sir, welcome.
Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah, brother. Staked Osmo when? STK Osmo coming soon, brother. So we have liquid staking coming to Cosmos, not just with staked Atom. We're gonna liquid stake the entire Osmos ecosystem. It's gonna be an osmosis, you could say. What's the vibes with that? How's that going?
Yeah, there's I was very not the biggest fan of LSDs for a long time, but at some point I learned to just accept it and give in, and this is the way that proof of stake works. Let's liquid stake everything now. So yeah, we have ST Osmo, obviously Stride is currently the biggest one, but like you mentioned, STK Osmo from Persistence should be coming soon. We have a proposal up from the White Whale folks. So they have two new ones. They have the Backbone LSD and the Eris LSD. So, lots of different LSDs. I think it's good. And I think it's good and healthy to have like sort of multiples to make sure that there's not any one overly dominant one.
Yeah. Why were you a bit hesitant on your first approach into LSDs? And then we'll kind of get into like what kind of put you over the edge and kind of like settle your concerns.
I don't know if I would say my concerns were settled. It's more that I just, my biggest issue was that I feel they, to an extent, somewhat undermine a lot of the like security properties of proof of stake. They kind of remove a lot of that. But then, I guess what happened was I eventually just like gave in and was like, okay, maybe like, I felt like there was just too much emotional attachment to like, I was helped develop like proof of stake at before Osmosis. I was working at the core Tendermint team, and we were sort of, I would say some of like the front runners of like, or leaders in like proof of stake mechanism design. Like we invented the concept of Slashit. Like that was Jaquan's invention, and like we had all these like mechanism designs we did to make proof of stake secure, and then it felt like LSDs to sort of like come in, undermine all of them. A lot of them. And then maybe at some point it's like, okay, maybe we just had too much emotional attachment to these like this idealized version of like proof of stake economics that we had in our mind. If we just like, let go of that and like accept that this is how it works. I had this tweet a few months ago that went more viral than I expected it to. I just said like, proof of stake is broken, like something like that. And like, that got picked up by everyone, like all the proof of work, the Bitcoin maxis started picking up, like, see, look, this guy, like, who's been working on proof of stake is like, thinks proof of stake is broken. I don't know. I think I'm hoping one day we'll find something better than proof of stake, but, I think right now we just need to focus on like making proof of stake work in the face of the reality that is LSDs. And so I think
Yeah, a bunch of DeFi degens come on and throw some interesting tech, and all of a sudden the hard work's been smashed. You must not like the idea of restaking either on the Ethereum side, because oh boy, we'll throw it.
I actually love restaking. Restaking was
my gosh.
So we came up with the idea of restaking like kind of in parallel with the Eigenlayer folks. So like we have this thing called mesh security, which is very similar to restaking, but it's meant to be like, well, why should it only be ETH for restaking? Why isn't everything usable for restaking? I should be able to restake Osmo and Axelar and anything. And there's some things I don't like about the Eigenlayer architecture. Like it actually uses LSDs like baked into the protocol, which I think is like the wrong design. I think there's, it should have been but there's like layers of the stack. There's proof of stake. There's like LSDs. There's restaking. I think restaking is like one level below, and then LSDs come on top rather than the other way around. But otherwise, in general, I'm a big fan of restaking.
Interesting. Good to know. And I think perhaps part of your bias comes from the architecture of IBC and Cosmos is very much Kepler dashboard, stake in a validator, do the governance. There's the unbonding. It's just part of the tribe, if you will. And so some of this kind of liquid staking, kind of breaks that apart, as you're saying. But on the flip side, what you get is, well, you get a ton of upside, a ton of capital efficiency. You get rumors of tons of modular airdrops coming for stake TIA holders, wink, wink, and you get tons more. Opportunities to like use Cosmos. Basically, Osmosis becomes more valuable because of liquid staking tokens. Like the opportunities on Osmosis are going to be like extrapolated so much because of liquid staking. And I see you guys are kind of getting ahead of that trend, trying to be more of like a DeFi hub. Where do you see SDK Osmo, SDK T, SDK DYDX, or ST version from Stride or Persist? How do you see that fitting in with Osmosis?
Yeah, so I think, like you mentioned, I think that LSDs are going to be a bigger and bigger portion of the DeFi narrative, especially as we move towards like more collateral based things. So like obviously I think there's always been this like a little bit of a thing where on the AMMs, on the DEX itself, on the spot DEX, obviously trading ST Osmo and ST Atom is more efficient, but there's this like user thing that people don't know what this is. They want to just buy Osmo, or they want to just buy Atom, right? And it's a huge user education hurdle to get them to that point, like, oh, this is what ST means, and there's this like time delay and all this kind of stuff. So, but once we start to move, Osmosis is working on a perps DEX right now. And in that world, it's like, I actually think that people would like to use like ST Atom as collateral, not Atom. Like if you're putting down collateral, you want that collateral to be, yield generating. So that's why I think that as we do that, we're going to see more of that. And so yeah, we very close partners with Stride. We actually internally incubated a project called Milky Way. So they're building the, we saw that there was a market opportunity that because of some of the architectural decisions that Celestia chose, it's hard for you can't use interchain accounts on Celestia. So we saw that and we're like, okay, look, if we can actually architect it this way, we can, introduce be the first mover advantage on Celestia staking derivatives. So, we came up with the architecture for this and corralled the validators. And then we reached out to a dev team in Korea. He used to be the founder of the CTO of Cosmos Station. So, knows the Cosmos stack inside out. And it's funny. He just started a job the day before. And then we reached out to him. He's like, okay, give me 2 days. I'm quitting my job. I'm going to work on this full time. And so, excited to see how Milky Way comes along. So yeah, the more
when, sir, when
hopefully by end of next month. So the plan was to be by end of November. Obviously things take longer than I always expected, but I think by end of this month we'll see MTL live.
Little Christmas gift.
Yes.
Merry Christmas, boys. Happy New Year. Cool, man. What's your vibe on the overall growth trajectory for IBC and Cosmos? I guess for our audience, the downfall of Cosmos in the bear market was obviously UST. The entire ecosystem has bounced back significantly. Now it feels like this atom inflation proposal is like a little canary in the coal mine to set off kind of a whole new direction for Cosmos. What's the vision? What's the thoughts now with regards to that inflation proposal, and how do you propose the ecosystem moves forward?
Yeah, so I will say I do think that it's worth this separating the growth trajectory of Cosmos from that of Atom and Cosmos Hub specifically. I think Cosmos is I don't know, in my opinion, a foregone. It's happening, right? I think the success of Celestia, the success of, the DYDX, I think Cosmos USDC is about to flip optimism pretty soon. Thor Chains has been crushing it recently. I think Cosmos is working and happening, and it's gonna be the more people that use the stack is only gonna get better and better, and it's gonna grow the network effects. Atom, on the other hand, yes, that was definitely there was some questionable moments, okay, what is the purpose of this thing? And to an extent, there's still some of that right now. But for me personally, what I think is that the goal of this is to become this interchain money. And I think today in crypto, there's this there's only two real capital assets right now, high value capital assets. It's Bitcoin and ETH, right? Nothing else even comes anywhere close, not even within a magnitude. And so how would we get a third capital? If you wanted to build the third capital asset, my belief is you can't just copy the same game of Bitcoin and ETH, right? Bitcoin started off with this idea of unchangeable monetary policy, 21 million Bitcoin that can never ever change. And that was a unique way of building a digital currency. A lot of people try to copy that, but no one ever got the same success as Bitcoin. ETH comes along and says, no, that's stupid. We're not doing this fixed supply thing. We're going to just follow our own route. And through iteration, they landed on this they have EIP 1559 pulling in one direction. You have the staking rewards pulling in the other direction. And you have this somewhat more dynamic monetary policy, but still static in the sense that it's there's no way for governance or something to change it. It's written into the code. And, right now, so many people just try to copy that of Ethereum, right? Solana is doing great and everything, but there's nothing new about the monetary policy of Solana, right? Why would I want to bet on that instead of ETH? I think that Atom has this unique opportunity where at the moment, I would say Atom is the most decentralized governance token in all of crypto. I don't think there's anything else that let's say within top 100, top 200 assets. I don't know. Maybe there's some random coin out there that no one's ever heard of. But and this is valuable, right? Because, and I mean decentralized governance in many ways. One, the token holder set is actually extremely distributed, right? In the initial ICO of Atom, they gave away 80% of the supply to ICO participants, which is relatively high compared to most projects, right? Nowadays, you hear of projects, it's 30% to the team, 30% to the foundation, 20% to investors, and it's the wider community gets 5-10% of the supply. And I love Celestia, but I actually just don't think it's going to be able to replace Atom as the money, just because of it is still very VC centralized backed on the supply distribution. Atom, on the other hand, is not. And it just has a culture of decentralized governance, right? And this kind of comes into play where we've had many very, very contentious governance proposals, sometimes passing on razor thin margins. But that's the sign of a healthy governance community, right? Where there is actual debate, not just one foundation or someone dictating what happens and everyone just follows along. So that's kind of what I think is valid. And so if you have a decentralized governance system, I think being able to control your monetary policy is important, right? You can do things one, modify your monetary policy. You could do things protocol-owned liquidity injections. You can do things incentives for driving the usage of it as money. There's a lot of things that if you add in a governance system, the US dollar didn't just become the global reserve currency by accident, right? There was active intervention and policy making that had to happen to make that possible. And I think that something with a governance system has the ability to do that in a way that, a governance-less system like ETH doesn't. And that is the opportunity for Atom to step. Now, the question is, will it step into that role? TBD, and it's up to the community to decide. But this halving proposal was the first, look, the community said, hey, we are going to use the white paper of Atom and the founder of Atom don't want this thing, inflation schedule, to change, but governance was able to vote to change it. And that is the first triumph of like this governance-backed money. And I'm hoping we'll see more such proposals coming soon.
Very cool. So as part of the like founding team of Tendermint, which obviously is very like embedded into Cosmos, like how do you like what's your personal take? Obviously, like we want like tons of involvement and participation from the overlying community. Like we like more proposals. I think that is really great. Consensus is a big part of this network, and it helps to build consensus, just like soft consensus at the governance layer across all the token holders. Like just as a generic token holder with your, kind of like your journey through the space, what is your take on like where the, like essentially like where this is going and what you think about this ongoing proposal?
Yeah. So which ongoing proposal?
So like which one you essentially what's your take? Not just like in the sense that there's like more of these proposals to come, but like this proposal around atom inflation. Like, what is your personal take on the monetary policy that Atom seems to be going right now?
Yeah. So I mean, I was actually I was in support of the halvening. Partially, this goes back to like going back to where we started with LSD tokenomics, where we had this like interesting situation where atom inflation was too high, and it's causing it to be it. Okay, so I gave this talk 6 months ago about like a 1-year retrospective on the Terra collapse, and one of the things I like note in there is like one of the big problems, like the really nefarious thing that like Anchor ended up doing was it cannibalized the Terra ecosystem itself, right? Like the job of Terra, like the thesis of Terra was build a real economy around the stablecoin, and that demand for the stablecoin will help is what actually keeps the peg at the end of the day. Problem is you had this like Anchor thing that was coming in and providing 20% yield, which was, one, that wasn't real demand anymore. That was like fake, like there was nothing actually backing that 20% yield. So that's fake demand. But two, it also cannibalized the rest of the economy. So if, let's say you had a real lending protocol like Mars, they had to compete with the 20% yield of Anchor, and they were struggling to get deposits. So, it was cannibalizing the thing. And so it's funny and then we actually had the same situation happening with Atom in the Cosmos ecosystem, where if Atom is this like meant to be this interchain money, and at the moment it is the highest value asset in the ecosystem. The problem is it, with its 15% staking rewards, is actually cannibalizing the usage of Atom in other places in the system, right? And so then you might think like, okay, the first order answer is like, okay, staking derivatives fix this, right? Okay, let's just like drive usage of ST Atom, which is good. That is the first step. But the problem is that actually doesn't fully solve it, because, ST Atom, you can only use it as collateral if there's a deep enough ST Atom liquidity pool. But the problem is to get liquidity in an ST Atom pool, there has to be, people have to be, whoever's LPing that pool, they're basically depositing a bunch of Atom with like no, and that Atom is not earning any of staking rewards. And so you have to and these are obviously like people who are LPing in this pool are like, pretty knowledgeable participants in the market. And so they know that they're losing that the staking yield. And so you have to compensate them for that. In Ethereum, the LSD staking rewards are roughly around like 4 or 5%, I think, for ST ETH. And so ETH, they're able to build up liquidity for ST ETH because it's a combination of trading fees, curve incentives, and Lido incentives. Those three together are able to get the ST ETH LPs to be as profitable as just holding ST ETH itself. That's only 4% that they have to make up. How are we going to make up 15% staking reward? And so the problem was it's very hard to get liquidity into an ST Atom pool. We kind of started to solve this a little bit via these protocol-owned liquidity injections. So the Cosmos Hub, basically, they put 450K into Neutron, they put 900K into Osmosis. So basically, the chain itself is acting as the LP of last resort almost. But at the that's why we were like, okay, that works, but I don't think that's a sustainable long-term solution, in my opinion. So that's why we have to drive down the staking rewards rate so that we can drive more demand for Atom and ST Atom in DeFi systems like Osmosis, Levana, etc.
Makes sense. I mean, the opportunity cost is now of being an LP is now dramatically lower for those who want to be able to have. Whether that is the end all be all or more proposals come to be determined, right? Yeah. At least we've gotten there where these protocols now don't have to emit. Osmosis doesn't have to. Theoretically, Osmosis could then emit half the amount of liquidity rewards, which then puts Osmosis in a better position from a tokenomics perspective. Now we scale that out to every protocol in Cosmos. What is the result over the next 3 to 6 months in your mind of this metamorphic event where now all these protocols don't have to give as many free tokens, they don't have to incentivize so much harder? What happens now? Number go up, but what else? What is a result on the economic side that you expect to see from this?
Yeah, I think we're going to start to just see a lot more usage of ST Atom in a lot of these systems, right? Now with the LSM, now it's just a matter of getting the proper projects to be the sink for all this liquidity now, right? I think Levana is going to be a big one. I think Membrane and Margin, Mars. You're going to see a lot of these projects start. There's this meme right now, Cosmos, the product market fit for Cosmos is perp dexes. And the thing with perp dexes is you need collateral. And I think ST Atom is this asset that there's, multiple $1 billion of collateral just sitting there. And that's how we bootstrap a lot of these new perp dexes. So for us, what we're going to do is when we launch our perp dex, we're going to build a vault that people can just deposit ST Atom into, and it will market make on the order book for people. So that's kind of what I see. And then the nice thing is, like you said, a lot of these projects are going to be able to start to flip profitable, right? Today, Osmosis spends a lot in incentives. We finally just turned on protocol fees and protocol revenue. So we have trading fees coming in. We have proto rev. Soon the MEV auction revenue is going to start flowing in pretty soon as well. So, okay, revenue has turned on, but we still got to drive down the costs of the protocol. And so that's going to come via being able to decrease these incentives.
Yeah, that's another phenomenon that we've continued to see, this pattern of fee switches. And there's a great article out there, maybe you've read it, it's called Hyperstructures. And it talks about the threat of the fee switch, but how maybe that is sustainable for someone for a governance token to be valuable, just by the threat of the fee switch. Because when you turn it on, and then there's a bunch of different considerations there. So kind of looking at some other examples, Uniswap on EVM, and how they've handled their fee switch, kind of what were the considerations that you had when thinking about whether or not to turn it on? And then, you mentioned it was just recently turned on, in the short time frame, the sample size that you've seen it on. Have you seen any differences in the data that you're collecting, either in order flow or the types of users or volume, as a result of now the switch being turned on?
Yeah. I think what we just saw at some point was that fees were volume was pretty consistent regardless of the fees that were being charged. Even when we have different, we noticed that okay, depending on what swap fee pool that we create, is it the 0.1%, the 0.3%, things tended to be pretty stable. The volume came regardless, partially because for a lot of the assets, Osmosis is the primary market for. And then for the assets that we are the secondary market for, yes, arbitrage volume goes down, but in times of high volatility, which we have been in for the last couple of months, right? it actually has been pretty negligible. So, you lose volume when the market's moving like very sideways. There's less ARB volume happening anyways. But like right now, we barely noticed like any real effect on volume. Volume has sort of only been going up, and I think it did just finally like bring in a lot of attention for Osmosis, right? I think there was this narrative that Osmo is this like just farming dump token only, right? But it's like, okay, well, now that there actually is real protocol revenue, it's like, no, this isn't just a farming dump token. This is actually, it owns the revenues that the Osmosis protocol built. So that just brought more attention and excitement to it. So I think in the last 2 months since we activated, it's already earned over $1 million in revenue. And, we expect to see that just continue to go up. And the other thing that's nice is once you start charging fees, so currently, I think that Osmosis is charging 10 bips per trade, which is online with centralized exchanges, right? That's about, I think we kind of just looked at what Binance charge something in the same ballpark for now. But now you can actually start to do fun things where you can start to do systems to reduce it, right? You can do like, trading tiers. The more you trade, the fees go down. Or you can do referral bonuses, right? So we can say like, hey, if you invite someone to use Osmosis, we'll give you 25% of the trading fees that they do. So now that you have this like stream of revenue that the exchange is making, we can actually use that to do, instead of pocketing it as protocol profit, we can actually use package those into growth techniques instead.
For sure. Yeah. Affiliate marketing, other kind of gamification, even through NFTs or quests or all different types of things are possible. So I think that's very much a middle to end of the bear market schema that we've seen here amongst different dexes. And it just makes sense, like, especially if market leader Uniswap does it, CalSwap does it, Osmosis does it. It's just going to be a thing in the future. And users don't care. Users pay for the security. They pay for the trust. They pay for like the brand. And, you look at anything in the world, you pay to use it, which brings you value. If Osmosis or insert dex here brings you economic value, you pay for it. Just life. Kind of switching gears, Celestia just rocketed the modular narrative. Like it just freaking put Cosmos on the map. And I think Rob had something, but real quick going into this kind of modular narrative, because I think it's a bit more exciting than DEX fees. The idea of this modular narrative is taking Cosmos and IBC and like it's really opening it up, I think, to the rest of the ecosystem with these different interop protocols. So from a base level, we'll start here. How does Osmosis fit into the modular narrative?
Yeah. I feel like the modular narrative is a little bit underspecified of what it means to be modular. The feeling like beyond just like the hype narrative of modular, like what does that actually mean? I think you could describe modular in multiple ways, right? There's, I would say horizontal modularity, which is something Cosmos has always been pro of like this app chain concept of like, okay, one chain doesn't have to do everything. We can have different chains focus on different parts. But then there's also what I call like vertical modularity, which is like, how vertically integrated is our system. So on one hand, you could say the Cosmos stack is actually extremely modular. Like the way we architected it was like the consensus engine is separate than the like state machine, and like the Cosmos TAs is a very modular system. Literally call them modules instead of contracts. And so in that sense, it's modular. But I think maybe the part that I actually disagree with the modular narrative a little bit is that every one of these components, like from a technical perspective, yes, they are modular. But from an organizational perspective, I actually don't think that things should be overly modular. I'm a big believer in like extreme vertical integration. Like I think the best products and best companies get made by vertically integrating. So you look at something like Apple, right? Like Apple builds these like amazing products because they build the software, they build the phones, they build the OS, they build the chips, right? Like they build everything from like top to bottom. And I think that allows them to build a more cohesive product experience than if they like, you see other, Android on the other hand, they outsource a lot of things, right? Like different company builds the phones, Google builds the OS, like, different companies build all like the chips, like it, and it works, right? Both strategies work, the modular system and the vertically integrated system. But like, I think the vertically integrated system really lets you like squeeze out the last bits of performance and of cost, right? Like, SpaceX like became so, I don't know if any of you have been reading like the Elon Musk biography. I've been reading it recently, and it's like, one of the things that SpaceX does really well is by vertically integrating everything, they like squeeze out the last bit of cost from everything. Because if you have this like, and that's kind of my worry with this whole modular take is like, okay, if a different chain is doing the DA layer, a different one is doing the consensus and sequencing and like oracles, and like everything is being done by a different layer, then it's like everyone needs to build a venture-backed business and charge their own fees. And I think that's actually just going to end up ballooning towards the costs to users. SpaceX can build ultra cheap rockets because they don't need a profit at every layer of the manufacturing stack. So that's kind of my, I don't know, hot.
It doesn't fit in. It's full on vertical integration from a DApp perspective, especially with Cosmos, because when you think about it, Cosmos and Ethereum did their approach opposite, and now are trying to converge. Whereas Ethereum started as one and is now going into rollups with L3s and app chains. Cosmos started as a horizontal stack and is now trying to figure out how to bring it all kind of together. So I guess from your perspective, it's more of like, it's not like, let's try to build, Osmosis, for example, as a chain with all these different parts. It's how do we bring together this horizontal stack of Cosmos, kind of all these different app chains together into a more seamless experience, which is already natively modular.
Yeah. I will say, like, on the other hand, there are times where you do need to outsource, right? Some things are just so like challenging, or not challenging, but like need such specialized care that it's worth outsourcing to work to someone that specializes in that. So in Osmosis's case, we made the explicit decision that like bridges are too complicated, right? Like the amount of bridge hacks and everything we've seen, they need like extremely specialized care. And that's something we don't want to build in-house. So that's why we decided to go work with like, Axelar was our first bridge partner, but now we've expanded to like Wormhole and Hyperlane and stuff as well, right? We say, okay, bridges, there's so many things we need a bridge to and so much security implications here. We're going to outsource that completely. And so, yeah, there are times where you do need to, be strategic on what you choose to outsource or not.
How do you see like the trade-off of horizontal, like staying modular, staying with the very like wide breadth of horizontal like market fit, and then I'm what I'm trying to get to is this liquidity landscape that's living on Cosmos right now. Like when you vertically integrate all of the liquidity across, like you have a series of apps that are all vertically integrated into Osmosis, then there's almost like this shared liquidity model, and it all becomes more efficient. So could you kind of talk us through like the landscape of liquidity on Cosmos now that it's pretty horizontally spread out, and what you're doing to kind of bring that together inside the Osmos stack?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Something I've thought a lot about, which is like, the liquidity landscape of Cosmos. There's this interesting thing, which is at the end of the day, a lot of crypto projects are just building trading infrastructure, right? Like we're all just building different ways of like trading assets, and most like L1s are and L2s are just building infrastructure to run trading dexes on top of. And then most like DeFi stuff are just building, at the end of the day, they're building some way of building a DEX or leverage infrastructure. So in Cosmos, I would say we actually have, there's a lot of projects that are not necessarily trading infrastructure, but like some of them are. So what Osmosis has done well is it is in the Cosmos ecosystem, it is by far the DEX where for any token that is not trying to build trading infrastructure, Osmosis is the obvious place to list their asset, right? Because we have all the users, we have the volume, we have like a great UX. And so we've succeeded very well on obviously Atom because it doesn't have its own DEX or anything. On Celestia because it is not trying to be trading infrastructure, things like Akash and Stargaze and all these projects that are not trying to build their own trading infrastructure. We've done a really good job of that. And for UST, we did as well, right? Because it was also not a DEX. Where we don't, the projects that we are not the main DEX for are the things who are trying to be their own DEXs, right? So like Neutron is like a token that's pretty popular right now, but like, they don't want to list their token on Osmosis because they want to keep that volume and liquidity on their own chain. Same thing with Say, same thing with like a couple of, and so I think the Astroport architecture has actually gotten some success where Astroport takes more of the Uniswap style approach and actually just deploys a version of their DEX on each of these chains. So that way the chains get to be like, hey, look at all this liquidity and volume that we have on our chain. But the thing is, at the end of the day, all that liquidity and volume is only for their own native token. It's not really for anything else. So what we are trying to, what we need to figure out as Osmosis is how do we make sure we capture some of that volume from other things. And we're actually seeing that. So someone went ahead and created a pool for a Neutron on Osmosis. And it's already, like in the last 2 days, it's already doing 10% of the volume that's happening on the Neutron chain itself. And I think eventually it's going to like exceed the amount of volume on the Neutron chain just because users want to trade where they're already comfortable, which is Osmosis.
Man, the app chains have so many consequences of liquidity. It's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
One of the things that we are considering doing is like, we might just start dispatching trades to other chains. Like if a user comes in and they want to buy, I don't know, Archway or not even Archway. Let's say they want to buy AVAX, right? And like, we just don't have that much liquidity for AVAX on Osmosis. We do support it, but there's like, I don't know, a few 100K of liquidity, which is not meaningful, right? What we might just do is say, okay, if someone wants to do that, we're going to dispatch a trade via Axelar to like Trader Joe, do a swap, and then send the AVAX back on the Osmosis chain. So that way people are still holding their assets and like the user experience is still on Osmosis, but we can just dispatch trades elsewhere. Someone might argue like, why are we giving volume away to other exchanges, to other DEXs? But that's volume we weren't going to capture anyway. We might as well keep the user and dispatch the volume.
Exactly. The user gets better execution because more liquidity on Trader Joe. Could you kind of like describe like how that works in practice and maybe even bringing in some of like the experience that you have working out at a consensus like group? Like how do you derive that consensus? If you're going to go send an order over to AVAX, like we know that like Osmosis, because it's a Cosmos chain, has its own set of validators. Those validators have to derive consensus with the Avalanche or wherever you're trading AVAX on Trader Joe. There's another set of validators and there has to be some sort of like state consensus about where the AVAX is and where what token you use to buy it. Mm-hmm. How do those two sets of validators arrive at consensus?
Right now, we basically outsource to a third validator set, in this case, which is the Axelar validator set. The Axelar validator set acts as our bridge, and they have this protocol called GMP, General Message Passing, that allows an account or a contract on one chain to trigger smart contracts on a different chain. So what we would basically be doing is sending the user, when they make their transaction on Osmosis, it gets picked up, the Avalanche Axelar validators basically are the ones who are actually triggering the smart contract, the Trader Joe contracts on Avalanche. And then when they get the AVAX, they're the ones like bridging it back. So we kind of outsource to the Axelar validators. And this is kind of why mesh security is so important as well, because that's what will make it so Axelar has the same level of economic guarantees as Osmosis, right? Like right now, so much of our stack is like, or our assets are dependent on Axelar. But at the same time, Osmosis makes up like 60 to 70% of Axelar's TVL. It would suck for either of us if the other got like attacked, right? So the nice thing about what mesh security will do is it will allow both Osmosis and Axelar to be secured by the sum of our two market caps.
And this is by combining the two validator sets?
It doesn't combine the two validator sets. We actually keep independent validator sets, but it uses a restaking paradigm where when I have my Osmo staked on Osmosis, I can restake it on an Axelar validator as well. And so that way, if that Axelar validator does something malicious, my Osmo gets slashed. So basically what it does is the validator sets are independent, but the economic security securing the two chains is actually like the sum.
It's a sum. It's a total.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and so what you and Hyperlane's great too. I mean, Hyperlane effectively will bridge through either using Axelar or Wormhole or a combination of them as well to bring that in. And then what you get to, if this is a feature that you want to take Osmosis through, what you get is you get a future where you don't have like crypto users of DEXs, you have Osmosis users. Where why do I need to go anywhere else other than Osmosis when I can swap everything here? And then I can do anything. And it's probably like more or less the vision of perps and lending and DEX and, the other kind of functionalities. And what's great is that we're finally seeing the infra catch up to this vision. It's like, I remember simple things like DeFi summer 2020 was like, damn, it's going to be really cool to have a settlement layer staked ETH that is always yield generating. Why would I ever trade into ETH? I always just keep staked ETH as my base, right? And so now we're getting like interop and now more staked assets in Cosmos. And the infra is catching up to the visions of the visionaries, it's exciting. Good stuff. Moving towards more of the kind of back, well, also kind of forward to this liquid staking token narrative is something that like I just want to hit on again because I think it's going to really open up a whole nother kind of world on Cosmos where we can unlock so much liquidity that's in validators. So when we have liquid staking unlocking an Osmo, we have Thea, we have DYDX, name your token, right? There's going to basically be like more money floating around, but still have the same governance properties, of somebody staking in a validator. So could you just walk us through what this is going to look like in the Cosmos ecosystem? So let's say I'm staking Tia right now, or I'm staking DYDX on a validator. Let's say I'm on Stake Cedo, or I'm on Figment, or wherever. And so once that protocol goes live, Stride, Persistence, I'm then going to be able to trade my stake for a liquid stake token receipt. And then I can go into Osmosis and I can, do a trade, or I can do some CDP on a chain. I can move my things all around. This is all going to be tracked back to the home chain. So is there any security concerns that you're seeing there from like moving stake tokens from chain to chain to chain, intertwining with DApp to DApp to DApp? Like, is there any worry that Cosmos isn't really getting ready for, where, I don't know, any sort of malicious event, or I don't mean to be too much of a doomsdayer, but I'm thinking of how much rehypothecation and then bridging from different chain to different chain with liquid staking tokens. Like, is there anything that you've thought of as far as that on the governance side, or, I'm just curious what.
Two interesting things I would say about. So one, I think the one thing I've been pushing Stride to do, and I think like is the right way of doing LSDs at the very least, is something I call copy staking. Because right now, when you like delegate to Stride, they have to choose a specific validator set to delegate to. And it kind of turns into like almost like a little bit of a POA system, right? Where it's like, okay, the Stride just chooses who the validators are. And if they get 80% market share, now they just choose the validator set, which I don't think is like really that okay. And so that's why I would like to do something where it's like an LSD should just delegate in the exact same proportion. Like you should pretend you remove the Stride's delegation. What is the distribution of stake? Delegate according to that distribution. So what you're basically making it happen doing is that you can either choose to direct stake, and choose the distribution of validators, or you can choose to go to the LSD and just get that extra liquidity, right? And so it's like, what will actually end up happening then is like the validators basically will direct stake, and it becomes like with their self bonds in order to get higher voting power. But then it's the people who don't care, they'll just go through the LSD, but the LSD shouldn't impact like the distribution,
the governance, and exactly.
Yeah.
Or else I just worry because it's still governance centric in Cosmos with the validators, that I just worry about something where somehow we lose track of this, and all of a sudden a freaking Chorus One controls all of freaking Osmosis governance, and then boom, like what the hell.
The other interesting thing, like that is, will be interesting to see if it plays out. I before we started, I heard you guys talking a little bit about like Jaquan's like fork and everything with after that halving proposal. I will say I actually find it to be interesting. So this is like Jay's thesis, at least, which I can get behind. Once again, the thing with Jay is he is very brilliant. He is just sometimes like so out of tune with the rest of the crypto industry that he doesn't know the standard terminologies that we all use to talk about things. And because of that, he struggles to explain his ideas in a coherent way. Maybe that's giving him too much credit here. He is also a little bit crazy, but I think he'll admit that. He knows when he's a little bit going off the rocker. But the generous reading of what the premise of Atom 1, or now I'm happy he chose my ticker. Atone. We were all atoned for my sins.
Thank goodness it was not Atom 1. That was gonna be a good show.
But Atone is cool. I really like Atone. But the premise here, is LSDs are as they suck up more and more of the capital, they are going to be like the biggest governance holders in all of crypto, right? And you don't want a situation where one LSD dominates the entire thing. But the problem is economic incentives, the way liquidity aggregates, by nature will push everything towards one dominant LSD. So how do you solve this? How do you actually encourage multiple LSDs? Is you have to make people care about something other than economic incentives, and you need to use tribalism to encourage diversification. And you do this by adding a political component to LSDs, where you turn. So once again, if LSDs are the governance, the governance power black holes, you turn them into political parties. So the idea is that maybe you'll have the Stride political party, you'll have the Atom 1 political party, you'll have this other political party.
And so you stake with the person that you align with, or the people that you align with.
Exactly. And so
that's great.
Jay's premise is hey, here is this very contentious governance proposal about the halvening, and this is a good dividing line to separate the progressives from the conservatives, right? He's the people who are anti-halvening are the conservatives. The people who wanted the halvening are the progressives in Atom governance. Let me airdrop my LSD governance Atone to the conservatives, because that is the party that I want to build an Atom governance political party around. And I think this actually makes a lot of sense. I think there's we'll see how it plays out. But from I got into crypto because I was I was really into political economy, and I think this is one of the most interesting political economy developments in crypto is if we see the emergence of LSDs as political parties.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, some people might just dump, but some people will be free money. I love this guy. I'm aligned. So is this going to happen? Is Atone happening? Is it confirmed? Is this fork happening?
I assume it'll happen. I mean, it's not, one of the things that's for better or for worse, and Cosmos SDK, it makes it so easy for you to launch a new chain. So, I'm sure they have the capabilities to launch the chain. Now, keep in mind, all of this premise of what I've been talking about politically, this I talked. Me and Jay had like a discussion about this like a month ago or a month and a half ago. So this was before the proposal actually happened, and so I don't know if the current vision of it is the same as when we talked about it originally. But I mean, if it is, I'd like to see it happen personally. And also, more. At the end of the day, I also think a toad is a little bit of a Jaquan meme coin, which
It's true.
there'll be yeah, and look, more meme. There's gonna be a lot of volume on it for sure, and that won't be on Osmosis, and so more volume.
Oh my God, there's the capitalism coming out. Here we go.
Yeah. Sonny's right at the middle. The progressives and the conservatives just gonna let them fight it out and then profit from the middle.
Switzerland. He's going to become the Switzerland of Cosmos.
Yes.
That's right, baby. The strong value, Interesting. And so you think that doing governance in using political kind of vision or separation, for lack of a better term, it could then also actually lead to a more well-sustained and decentralized, more secure governance system via LSTs.
Yeah, I think it'll lead to LSD diversification, which is important, right? Like that, you actually see this a little bit in like Lido and Rocket Pool, right? I think Lido and Rocket Pool have slightly different views on how like Ethereum governance and like stuff is supposed to work, and that's what leads with Rocket. Like everyone who delegates to Rocket Pool is doing it, I think, partially for ideological purposes more so. Like they're probably better off getting the higher liquidity
100%.
Lido, but. And that's a good thing, right? You want to leverage this like political diversity to lead to like better security.
But as you said, in Cosmos, it's even more so governed that like the difference between ETH and Rocket Pool, from my opinion, is like, well, Lido and Rocket Pool, we don't want Lido to have too much stake, so we're going to stick with Rocket Pool. With this, it's like, well, freaking Jay Kwan is this and this and that and drama there and this. And then on top of all that, there's actually all of that governance on every single chain. So it's like a whole other. So I think your thesis on Atom being the number 3 by not taking the same path and being governance money. And I think I saw you tweet this. Maybe somebody else was like, Atom is the most decentralized governance money in crypto. Maybe it was Jack or Zaki, like in all of crypto. And I think that's totally the path to take and to lean into. Or else you just become another alt L1 with a set of 30 validators. That's not what you want.
Yep.
Exactly. And with like more governance around that, it means I think it means that monetary policy is more adaptable. Bitcoin obviously has the most rigid monetary policy in all of crypto. Ethereum's like less rigid than Bitcoin. We saw EIP 1559, but it's still like not so fluid that the community can make decisions. Cosmos is super adaptable. Like anyone can put up a proposal. Next thing you know, the atom inflation rate is cut in half, and like it doesn't work. We just put up another proposal. We increase it again. It's like very fluid, nimble, cool, very adaptable. Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen it, so let's see.
Yeah, it's definitely it's not the norm in crypto for sure, but. If you're trying to build a new thesis, like you're not going to do it by copying what already works.
It's been a pleasure to have you on, Sonny. I appreciate your insights and your hard work thus far in the Cosmos ecosystem, and I know many people do as well.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being on.